Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. If you've checked out the title, you'll see we have a guest, and we'll get to them very shortly. But before that, Magical Learning is a training facilitation company that's been running for over 25 years and partnered with global thought leaders like John Mattone and Robin Sharma. But we love to share our learnings from experts, and today we're doing that on this podcast with our friend, Jason Dunn. So, Jason Dunn, before we get into anything, welcome,
Hi.
and how's your week been?
Thanks, Jez. Great to be here. Brilliant week. Thank you. Try and have a brilliant week every week and a brilliant day every day. Every day is a gift. Got to make the most of every day.
And look, we're so excited to have you on, already bringing some very positive energy, which I think anybody listening to this on their Monday or whatever day you're listening to this is going to be enjoying. Now, Jason, your career is unbelievable. When we start going through some of the different things that you've achieved, there's so many different things across so many different areas. We're talking ultramarathons, we're talking Ironmans, we're talking business success. So, Jason, do you want to give us a little bit about yourself for listeners and viewers that might be being introduced to you for the first time?
Thanks, Jez. Very kind, very generous. Thank you. 62 years old. So there's a fair bit that's happened in there to kind of trying to condense. I was born in the UK, and I like pretty much every child in the UK, every male, every boy in the UK. The dream is to play professional soccer in the Premier League, or First Division as it was way back then. I decided I made a critical decision that I regretted for 25 years. So that was my dream. I played 4 games a week. As a young teenager, at 15, I was offered an apprenticeship for a First Division club, which back then was not the top tier. That was one down in the Second Division. And I had to make a very confronting, difficult decision for a 15-year-old. And becoming an apprentice in a football team is high risk. They take on 40, probably only 2 make it, and by then, you've missed all of your school studies. And so I made a decision with my head, not my heart, and pursued my school studies. And it was one I regretted for the next 20 years until finally I woke up and made one choice that changed my life. And probably we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I've worked in finance had a 35-year career in finance, everything from a financial advisor to begin with to a CEO of a mid-sized national firm. And there's been lots of quite a few things to talk about along the way. So hopefully I can get those out and put them in some sense that they'll help watchers or listeners become better than they were yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, what an amazing story to tee us up, because we've got, there's so many different elements in there that I'm really excited to pick into. But before we get into that, I do want to tee up your book a little bit, and then we can start getting into a bit of a chat. So let's talk about your new book, Greatness Doesn't Care, because the first thing that I think people will be noticing is that you do seem like someone who does care in a really kind way, but yet we've got a book called Greatness Doesn't Care. So do you want to tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about what prompted you to write it and how you ended up with that title?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you. It's actually my second book. The first book I wrote 2.5 years ago, self-published, because I couldn't get a publisher to take on essentially what was a kind of memoir of my life and a self-help read. So unless you're pretty famous, and I'm not famous, so they won't take that on. So I published that myself. It's called Unlimited, and essentially it's the essence is how you grow your mindset to the point that you actually your mindset, what you believe you're capable of doing is unlimited, and doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. It just means that you found a way to unlimit yourself. So self-published that. No advertising, no support, sold about 5,000 copies around the world. And what I love the most is every couple of days, or there's definitely not a week that's gone by in that time where somebody in the world that I haven't met and don't know comes back to me and says, I read your book, I changed my life. I read your book, I achieved things that I thought were impossible, which again is the kind of essence of the book. So that I love. So I decided that I hadn't done a good enough job with Unlimited, because I'd written my first book, 320 pages. So I set about writing Greatness Doesn't Care, because I needed to get better at helping people. And so Greatness Doesn't Care, Greatness doesn't care who you are, where you're from, how old you are, your religion, your color, what you have been through. It just cares You find your purpose and you go after it and you find meaning. And so essentially, that's kind of greatness doesn't care. That's just a quick plug. That's what it looks like. Nice shiny cover. Um, and what I wanted to do in that is to actually place in a logical order what I believe, and for me, would have been the 14 steps to finding my own greatness. Whether you, and essentially every human is pretty much stuck at one of those steps or is struggling at one of those steps. And so I wanted people to read it and identify with where they're at and what is the big thing they can start making small moves on to move, to grow, and to move their life forward. And I kind of there are some elements of my life in there to kind of showcase that step, and then I brought in other remarkable humans in history. But so greatness doesn't care; it just cares that you get going. It cares that you rise. And sorry, this is really important for the context of the rest of this conversation. Greatness is not about winning. Greatness is not about being the best, although for some people that's what they aspire to do. Greatness is definition of greatness for me, and everyday greatness is achieving and accomplishing something aligned to your purpose that is truly meaningful for you, that has required you to overcome struggle and failure to achieve what you achieve. And so that's the essence of personal greatness. What greatness isn't is a comparison with anyone else. And comparison is the thief of joy and the thief of greatness. So I'm sure we'll touch a little bit more on that. So the foreword is written by Dr. Trun Scoggins, best-selling author and the brother of David Goggins.
David.
So I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about discipline. He is, the ultimate, discipline guru, and his brother Trunus described me. I was very humbled when he said, "You are the refined David Goggins." I'm sure I'm not in that league, but I give him my best shot.
Well, you know what? What a great place to start, because I actually think, a lot of our listeners will probably know David Goggins and sort of have at least a brief understanding of the
Yep,
story.
I'm sure they will.
So I think that you being sort of talked about as the refined David Goggins is a great place actually for us to kind of start this conversation. And you were just talking about discipline as well. So Danette's question here might tee us off, and you can just kind of go a little bit into how you approach it. But
Sure.
Danette loves defining things. So what do you define as discipline?
Okay, we're going to talk about discipline. And again, this is a value that's discipline is one of the 14 steps to greatness. Discipline is, and if I can context this, I love the ancient Stoics, ancient Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and Seneca and so on. And so for me, I've studied that. And one of my great inspirations is Ryan Holiday, who, if you haven't read any of Ryan Holiday's books like Wisdom Takes Work, or they are sensational reads, and you will acquire great wisdom from those. But for the Stoics, discipline is at the very center of their philosophy. I mean, it's the bedrock of their philosophy. Discipline is self-mastery. That's what the Stoics tell us, and that's what I wholeheartedly believe. So discipline is self-mastery. And they describe that in very specifically, saying that discipline is the alignment of wisdom and action. Wisdom and action. And the discipline, so wisdom and action means having the wisdom to know what's important to know, and taking action, and taking action regardless of how you feel in the day, the circumstances, what's happening around you. That self-mastery and self-control, that's the key. That is the pathway to personal and, I believe, to organizational greatness. So if I can just rewind a second, because again, this is, some of the elements, some of the steps to greatness are bigger, I believe, than others. But discipline and the wisdom to know what you need to do everything starts with purpose. Purpose is the antidote to fear. Purpose is the antidote to happiness. Like purpose drives humans way beyond where they once thought, was possibly capable. So um, having that purpose, then finding courage, and we'll talk a little bit more about courage, but the wisdom with discipline links back to purpose and knowing what's important, whether it's personally or in business, to get up and do every single day. Because you can be disciplined doing a bunch of things that really don't make any difference. So that kind of feels pointless. And so for me, it's knowing. So essentially, the sort of four of the biggest elements and the starting elements or the steps of greatness are, and these are the biggies, purpose, courage, mindset, and planning. So whatever it is you do, again, business, personal life, planning is essential, whether it's strategic and tactical. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. So once you have a plan and you have a tactical plan that literally determines what it is that you need to do every single day to achieve something remarkable, or less remarkable, just achieve something. But in its extreme, achieving something remarkable that's 5 years away, you must have a plan. And what that does is enables you to go back and have the wisdom to know with confidence what you need to get up and do today, which actually might seem very small compared with this massive goal in 5 years or 10 years, which again could be personal, could be a business goal. So that's the wisdom to boil it down through planning to know what you need. And then discipline is you just get up and do it. If I can give you the context of where I found my discipline, or the context of that discipline, I'd say in the last 25 years, I've trained 11,000 times. In that training, I have circumnavigated the earth on my bicycle 3.5 times, and I've run the circumference of the earth 4 times, and I swam the English Channel 80 times or something like that, which sounds kind of grand, but they are a result of getting up every day for 25 years and doing what I said I could do. They said what I promised myself I would do. So they are non-negotiable. And the wonderful thing when you boil it down to what you need to do today is you don't become discouraged by looking at what you're doing today, going, how on earth am I going to achieve this in 5 years or 10 years? Like, this doesn't seem important, or the gap is so great between where my purpose drives me to be and where I am that we kind of just throw it out. So for me, that is discipline. And I've been hospitalized 35 times in my life. I had 4 near-death accidents. I've been hit by one that nearly killed me with a drunk driver, and when I was 17. And I've been hit by trucks, trailers, you name it, while riding on my bike. I've lost count of the amount of bones. It's at least 40 bones that I've broken. And I have, in those 11,000 sessions that I planned, the only sessions I didn't do was where I was physically not capable. Like, other than that, my mindset was, you have to find a way to do this. And they would be, coming back from extreme injury, like 10 broken ribs or whatever it is. I would know that I needed to get back and train quickly. So that is the wisdom of knowing, and the discipline is showing up in life. It's showing up and doing what you know needs to be done, and that may well be for your business, your family. It's showing up. So I've been pretty relentless in discipline. And for example, I would, in that time when I was a CEO and some of the other exec jobs, I'd be on a plane every week, and sometimes I'd be on 4 or 5 flights. Or I'd often fly, say, from Sydney to Melbourne for the day. So I would get up and train, and I'd be on a really early flight. I go flat out all day. I'd get back. I'd have my backpack. I'd change out of my suit, put my backpack on, and I'd run home from the airport. Or I'd go to had to go to a business function, so I would, I'd just change at the function and say, hi, everyone, I got to go. And I would just put my backpack on and run home. One of the reasons why I gave up drinking for 25 years, and I did drink a little bit too much and smoked too much and took the easier pathway in life. So that's before I kind of finally woke up and found my purpose.
Well, let's actually kind of stay there because there's so many things that you've said that have sparked different things that I want to talk about. But there's
Thank you.
what one thing is, first of all, you said you've been to hospitalized 34 times. Was that correct?
35. I've got another one
30.
coming up.
Okay, 35 times. And I thought that was a lot, but then I realized you were saying you've done 11,000 training sessions. So I think the maths on that is probably okay. There's a lot, like if you put that as a
Yeah.
fraction, it's
Interestingly, I mentioned this in Greatness Doesn't Go, because people are going, I've heard someone say, oh, well, that's what you get for living like that. And I go, only 45% of those things were directly related to training. Some of them were illnesses that I had no control over pre-transforming my life, pretty serious things, that could have been fatal.
Mm.
So not all, and some were before that kind of, 35 to 62. There are a whole bunch that were before, but uh, I guess I was blessed. I guess, mindset, our minds control everything, and what you
Mm.
accept as a reason or as an excuse, what you use, your self-talk, how you talk to other people, all of those things will, impact your mindset.
Yeah, well, I actually want to sort of reflect on that mindset because you're covering something that I think is because you're talking about all those different times that you've sort of been to hospital, which means, 35 bouts of recovery and then getting back into it from different stages. And,
Yep.
I'm also someone that has like, I just have a condition where I have a lot of issues where I have to keep recovering a lot. And it can be really hard to keep going back after you just have been, especially, you train, you get to a
Mm.
certain point, then you get injured and you have to sort of
Yep.
go right back, sometimes then restart. Is it part of the discipline that helps you get through that? How do you get through it sometimes when things that you would normally be able to do might not be on the table, say in a recovery period? How do you keep your mentality solid? Because I've struggled with this, I have to be honest.
Yeah. We all struggle. And please, we got to talk about struggle. Really, really important. Struggle and failure. Um, purpose is the antidote to everything. So if your purpose, and a purpose is something that brings real meaning to your life, with purpose, you can overcome anything. So whatever the scenario is, you always anchor back to your purpose. And I know you're going to talk about how do you get how do you, when you're struggling, get yourself through, last three quarters of a race. Um, Everything in life is the same. You have to anchor it back to your purpose because it's the antidote. And a huge mistake, well, I won't call it a mistake. Most people that aspire to do something will set goals. Very cool. Goals are good, but goals are goals. And I find that many people that set goals drive themselves towards a goal solely towards the goal. And whether they achieve the goal or let's say they achieve that accomplishment, that goal, it kind of then, you go from up here and then you go, what's next? What's the next goal? What am I? Whereas a purpose, purpose pervades, all the way through your life and it influences everything else around you. So when you do great things, you feel good about yourself, that pervades every aspect of your life. So yeah, it's purpose, it's purpose. And I think that would be really helpful because, to context goals and purpose. And so New Year's resolutions, that's what most humans on the planet set some sort of you've set a few. I reckon you've
Yes,
set a few.
yes. Yeah.
And so Jez, what do you think of the four buckets of goals? What do you think most humans set? Like 90% of all New Year's resolutions are related to four things.
Okay, I'm going to guess one is gym or working
Yep.
out or something like that.
Yep.
And I don't know if this is related, but maybe some sort of diet thing.
Yep. Yep.
Maybe something along the lines of picking up a new skill or something.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and my final.
Yeah. Go on.
Oh, sorry, I was
Final
just going
one.
to say the last one. I think would be having maybe making more money or something.
Oh, mate, have you done this before?
No, I haven't. I was just thinking about what
No.
people tell
So
me their goals are.
there you go. So the goals are, health and fitness, losing weight, financial, yeah, but four One's financial, the three are related to how we feel and health. And
Mm.
then, the other one is typically, most people in business will not necessarily wait for a New Year's resolution, but they're the four key ones. So, um, and they'll set them over, probably over the year, but 90% fail, 90% fall
Mm.
short of their goal. Within 1 month, 70% have fallen away. And there are very specific reasons: purpose versus goals, lack of planning, and discipline, is an important element. But these things shift up in front. So let me give you an example. I want to lose 5 kilos. Admirable. Lots of people do that. Um, the issue with that is it's a number, it's a statistic, and it really doesn't have any meaning. And often, not that, I mean, uh, your own views around your own life are what are really important, but we're consumed with losing weight, kind of looking better, when really, losing weight and the impact of that, potentially reducing visceral fat and all sorts of things are health related, not necessarily how I look. So here's let's have a go at this. So I want to lose 5 kilos as opposed to I want to change my life. I want to show up. I want to feel the best I've ever felt. I want to live longer. I want to feel energized. I want to be able to do, all the things with my family, my kids. That's a purpose. And replaying that purpose, a purpose is not a goal. Purpose is a meaning, and a purpose is full of meaning and full of benefit. So mine, when I give me an example of, so I had, family purpose, and but for me, I didn't have a purpose. I was lost. I was making excuses. I was taking, until 35, I was taking the easier pathway. I was instant gratification, few too many beers, that kind of stuff. So I couldn't swim. I had a deep fear of drowning, and I grew up in the UK. I couldn't swim, and a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who I worked with this at a bank, said, "Hey, we're going to put together a corporate triathlon team, BRW triathlon. This is like 27 years ago. Um, and you want to do it? It's me and uh, me and John. So do you want to do it?" I didn't really didn't really know what a triathlon was. I was like, "Yeah, I'll do that." And so I said, "What's a triathlon?" And he laughed and he said, "Oh, you got to swim, bike, and run." And there's three of us. And I said, "Yeah, okay, great." What I was thinking in my assuming I was just going to do the run. And even though I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day and I did like the couch, I went, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I started training. A couple of weeks later, I caught up with Rob again and said, Jace, how's the training going? He said, "Yeah, I've been doing some running. 3 kilometers. I reckon I'll be able to nail that." He goes, "How's the swimming going and the cycling?" I went, "Well, what do you mean swimming and cycling?" He goes, "Well, that's a triathlon." I go, "Well, I didn't know I had to do that. I just thought I was going to do the run." I said, "No, no, mate, you're going to do the whole thing." And he just looked at me and said, "You okay?" Because the color completely drained from me. I felt sick in the stomach. I thought, how on earth am I going to swim 300 meters? I was terrified, but you know what? In that moment, I just knew that that decision was so important for me, not running away and for, taking the tougher road as opposed to the easier road. I didn't fully realize the enormity of it, but I knew that it was something that I just shouldn't back away from. Anyway, so the first time, a couple of days later, arrived at the swimming pool in Brisbane, sat outside in the car park for 20 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel and the engine still running so I could make a quick getaway. And there was this internal battle going on within my head. One going, "You know what, you got to step up and do this." The other one going, "Yeah, you're scared. You can drown. Go home." After 20 minutes, turned the car off and I just went in and I swam two 25-meter laps, not all at the same time. One 25 meters, had a rest, sucked in the air, and then did the other 25 meters. And I also realized then that I needed to actually build a plan to build belief. And belief is one of the other key steps of Greatness Doesn't Care. And it's how you build evidence based fact to support and promote belief. So I built a little plan that would gradually work me up with each of these distances to have the confidence before I showed up in Noosa River that I wasn't gonna drown, which I kind of nearly did. And And so that's what happened. And I stood on the beach, you know, ego, bold as ever. I was a pretty quick runner. I'm going to stand at the front of 150 people in my wave. Then I shot into the water, running in. I was in the lead. And by the time we got 50 meters out into the river, the turnaround point, I was on my back. I was like a turtle. Well, turtles don't go on the back only if they're in danger. But I was on my back and legs going away. And I thought, just how am I going? And I turned around to have a look, and there was no one behind me. They'd all swum over the top of me, and they were all the way. Anyway, flip back over, and I made 300 meters, and I came out of the water dead set last, but I felt absolutely amazing because I'd done this. The belief that I had was validated, and off I went on the bike, and I think I ended up in 10th place overall because I was pretty good at the other legs. And then I fell in this hole, I was just, for days I floated and I just fell in this hole and go, what's next? And about 2 weeks later, and back then, the Hawaii Ironman World Championships were kind of this peculiar, extreme event, toughest one day event on the planet. And I sat there with a cigarette in my mouth and my cup of coffee in my lounge room. Used to smoke inside in those days. Yeah, in fact, you could smoke in planes back then, I think, as well. So I watched it and I was just so captivated. And by the time it finished, I went, "That's what I'm going to do. That's my goal." And so it was. Each leg was then going to be 14 to 16 times longer than what I'd just done. My brain could not comprehend how I could do that, and I knew I had to build belief again. So I just started to build a plan, set the goal for 5 years away. And a couple of weeks later, as I'd started training, it occurred to me that I actually had a goal, but not a purpose. And I was trying to put meaning to it. And what came to me was what would be meaningful and purpose for me was to go and find what I was capable of, not what I wasn't, how far I could push myself, how far I could push my mind and my body to prove to myself that I could turn my talent into something truly meaningful because talent is never anywhere near enough. So that's what I did. That's why my purpose became, and that purpose is the same 27 years later. I mean, there are some adaptations. Now my purpose, my big purpose that sits alongside that is to share what I've learned and what I've seen of other people who've done remarkable things and kind of bring that to the world and say, this is my version of how you do it. Here's the manual, here's the framework. Take small steps, but just get started and go and do it. So that's now my purpose. And along the way, I think I was 2 months into a 7-month training program out on the Sunshine Coast one day, just going for a cruisy 50K ride along the beaches and whatever. And I loved the sun, and I did the most stupid thing. I went for a bike ride with no shirt on. And as I was coming, I'd gone through Coolum. I was going by Twin Waters Resort. I suddenly heard this big bang, and then a fraction of a second later, the world just disappeared, and a truck with tons of scaffolding had hit me from behind. And the driver behind the truck said, "I just went up in the air and disappeared out of view." And I came back down on my butt and on my back that was not covered, and I lost two layers of skin that big on both sides of my back, and the same on my butt cheeks, like big areas of skin. And that was a couple of weeks out from Christmas, and it was 40 degrees in Queensland. My house didn't have air conditioning, and I had 4 or 5 days of them scrubbing stuff out of the wounds in hospital, and I couldn't sit down, couldn't do anything. It just was impossible. So anyway, 8 days later, I was part of a test back then with some synthetic skin. So I put some synthetic skin on, and 8 days later, I was off again. I was training. So.
There's just so much again in that answer, and I think that there's a concept of you being able to help people plan belief and like taking like what they can believe and even beyond that and giving them steps to get there. But so interestingly to me, it seems like that moment in the car before you went out to go for that swim was kind of a huge moment because because as you're talking about everything, it's the thing that took like that triathlon from being a run for in your, sort of in your
Yeah,
mind to actually something that's like you've got
yeah.
to conquer something that you haven't conquered
Well,
before.
what that required was courage, and courage hadn't always shown up in my life at the right times. And I'd taken the easier road. I'd made some pretty poor decisions. I'd done things wrong, as yeah, as we all do, and as I continue to do. But we all need to try and learn from that. So it's about courage. The thing with courage, though, is you need to keep making courageous decisions, and that often decisions that change the course of a life are small. Lots of decisions are actually small, and may not be the thing that you go, that will change my life. It will change the direction of your life if you keep making small ones. But you have to make thousands of them, and you have to continue to make them. The courage part gets easier because you have the proof and the evidence that you will achieve what you want need to achieve, or and that might be for your community. It doesn't necessarily winning races. It might be business, might be community, might be family, might be anything. But it gives you that confidence and that belief that you're on the right track. And that is what is so important in moments of struggle and failure. I failed as epically as anyone. I've been to a world championship and been so sick that I had to be dragged out of the water. In amongst 2,000 competitors in France at a world championships, and I had the embarrassment 100 meters into the swim of having my worst nightmare. I nearly drowned because I think I pretty much had pneumonia and bronchitis anyway. And I've had a couple of other epic ones. Through every epic failure, I've learned to bottle that and learn from it. Every epic failure has been the genesis of everything great that I think I've ever done. And when I say great, that's not better than other people. It's great for me. So I only compare myself to me. And you know what? You are the only person that can hold yourself accountable. So that's only relative to me. So they've all been born from that. And so, as opposed to bemoaning struggle, which most of us do, we're doing something, our head tells us it's hard. Get rid of the word hard out of your vocabulary. Stop thinking it. Stop saying it. Because if you say it, something's hard, you think it's hard, it's hard. So remove the words from your head, like things like can't, hard, disappointed, hate, highly toxic, highly negative words. Get rid of them. Stop thinking them. Stop saying them. You know what? When you do that, you will become acutely aware of the people around you and their language. You'll get a lift and you hear someone that go, oh, I hate it. That bus was 3 minutes late this morning. You go, and in my head, I'm going, really? You hate the boat? Like, gee, most people in this world will be happy to have a bus, let alone a bus that arrives 2 hours late in many countries, or even a bus. Everything is perspective and everything is relative. So you can. Oh, but sorry, we're sidetracked. Let's go back to struggle and failure. One of my favorite stories, one of my favorite examples is at the time, the greatest player in the world in tennis was Roger Federer. And, he was just, and still is, he's a remarkable human. And he won 80% of the matches that he played and became, the most celebrated tennis player in history. Interestingly, though, if you bring that down ball by ball, point by point, he failed as often as he won in points. He failed, so every other point he lost, and he was still the greatest tennis player in history. He failed millions of times. He lost millions of points or hundreds of thousands of points, and yet he became the greatest player in history. So, anyway, the thing about once you start to get mastery of your mindset, and we're talking about failure and struggle, if you want to grow, if you want to do anything that's where you're better than yesterday or anything that's significant, anything that's really meaningful, you're going to fail and you're going to struggle. If you don't struggle and you don't fail, you're not growing. It's as simple as that because your life is, you're living a half life, and so you must struggle and you must fail. So if you can accept that fact, be prepared. And for me, let me give you an example. Every week I would do at least one run up, a 6 hour run up and down one hill. because I believe, and I always trained alone, I always believe if you train and create mental strength, resilience, then race day it's tougher again, but it's like a party because there's loads of people around you and there's this great incentive at the end of the day. Um, so I would run up and down a single hill, 1.5 k's up, 1.5 k's down. I would do that regardless of the weather. It's 35 degrees C. My training plan was to do it on that day. I would do it. And by the way, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, you don't have the discipline. You do that a few times, and that becomes your identity. Once you've built it into it and it's a habit, that becomes your identity too. So just a little side point there. So I would run up and down, and sometimes you're going to have to run up this hill at 20 times and down it 20 times. And I'm going to give you two examples because I know one of the questions you're actually going to ask. Thanks for giving me that insight. Yeah, the point is that if you're going to do it 20 times and you've been training and you've run 150 Ks during the week, and this is your Sunday session, it's going to be 210 Ks for the week, which is a fairly difficult week, then sometimes you're running up the fourth one and you're feeling tired and you're feeling lethargic and, you've been training for 7 months nonstop, 8 months, 9 months nonstop, and you're feeling tired. Your head is just going, oh, this is hard, and let's quit and be easy to go home, come back tomorrow, blah, 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 every excuse. And this battle rages in your mind. Every time my head would say that to me, I would smile. Because smiling is also, will generate, serotonin and all the other good stuff. And it will go away. Like really smile. It went away. It might only be for 5 minutes, it might be for half an hour. And in big, big races, you get to the point where that's every 2 minutes. So that's one of my favorite techniques. And the other that I know I'm ahead, but I'm on a roll. The other one that you said is how do you, and this is again, life, business, doing a race, whatever, you can be 20%, 25% into something and you're feeling exhausted, or you're feeling stress and a whole bunch of other things. Yeah. How do you do the whole distance? All right. So this is probably my best example. The Western States 100 miler, which is the oldest, they say it's the oldest and most prestigious 100-mile trail race in the world. It's been running for 52 years. It ran on the weekend. I was fortunate enough to get in that when I was 45. And it was, the camera crew laughed at me when I got there. That was my first ever trail race. These days you have to qualify running 100-mile trail races over mountains. In those days, if you were a foreign participant, you could get in if your running CV was, right up there. They would let you in. Anyway, so I got in, got there, got interviewed by the film crew. They laughed at me. They said, they went, "This is your first trail race. This is the Western States 100. This is your first trail race. You must be joking." Anyway, so I walked away for a few moments and doubted myself after that. But I had been running undiagnosed with a torn medial meniscus, which had gone a lodge back in between in my bones to my knee joint. I actually wasn't diagnosed until another 10 years after. And I was running 200 Ks a week on that thing. I got there the week before. You're at 6,000 feet in altitude at the start line, preparing the week before. Your heart goes 30% faster at 6,000 feet in altitude. And so I was ready. I was a couple of days where I was having trouble walking because of the altitude, because my knee was so bad. So, this is your one shot. You're here, you've got to put that out of your mind. So anyway, 5 a.m. in the dark, you start at 6,000 feet, and the first 6 miles of the race, you run to 10,500 feet above sea level, where the oxygen is about 60%. And Heartbreak Hill in Sydney, which is part of the city to surf, I think something like 200 times the elevation of Heartbreak Hill. In the first 6 miles, and there's 40,000 feet of vertical elevation change. It goes from snow to 100 degrees in the canyons. You run through rivers. You can run down the side of a mountain, and you're literally in a gully with rocks, and you've got 45 switchbacks. That's a tough day. And anyway, so I got up to the top. I'm going down the other side, and about 500 meters down the other side. So I'm sort of 6.5 miles into this race, and my knee was excruciating. It was every step hurt, and my mind immediately went, "Oh my God, you've got oh, what's the math? You got 63 and a half and 93 and a half miles to go, and I'm worried just about getting the next 100 meters." So I had to lock that away. And this is what I encourage a lot of people to do, regardless of anything, in those moments of doubt or when things are not going wrong. Is you go back and you reassure yourself and go, I did the work. I believe in this. This is my purpose. This is not going to take me today. I am bigger than this. And I locked out the 93 and a half miles, and I knew there was an aid station, 3 miles away down down in a canyon. I went, you know what? Forget the 93 and a half, just run to the aid station. And so that's what I did. And, I had to keep doing that. And it got to the point that, because I'd never done a trail race before, there were times when in daylight, I was just going, we're just going to run to that next tree. And there are a lot of trees in the forest. I would do tree by tree by tree. It was an interesting day. And, I'd read a book, Dean Carner's, I think, he Confessions of a All-Night Runner or something. I can't remember what his book's called. Anyway, he brought ultra endurance running to the world, and I was so inspired. But he talked about during the race the massive blisters and getting them super glued and losing your toenails. And I was kind of afraid of that. I thought, oh, it won't happen to me. But I did lose lots of toenails that day. And when you're running, what it's like when you're running flat out downhill, steep hill. You're doing that, your feet are jammed in the end. You got no toenails or a bunch of toenails gone. And I did have many blisters super glued back. You get into an aid station, they get scalpel them, squeeze the super glue in, and they just shut them with duct tape, and away you go again. So
Wow.
that was a day where I learned a great deal about myself. I think I found more courage that day than kind of any other day. So
Mm.
everything is mindset. Everything is mindset. And so that's why I try and help people and work with people on creating belief, setting plans, ensuring their purpose is in place, um, conceptualizing, putting perspective into courage, because fear is the thing that stops most humans from becoming who they were meant to be, who they can be, or the greatest version of themselves, whether it's business, life, or otherwise. It's all up here, and it's all about overcoming and walking alongside fear. And you know what? Fear never, fear doesn't necessarily go away. And if it does, it probably means you're not living much of a life. Even in my 14th Ironman race, 13th Ironman race, I panicked in the swim surrounded by 1,500 people, hyperventilated, and had to swim sideways. So you walk alongside it, and you have the belief and the confidence, and that's what you keep telling yourself. So
Yeah, well, look, we're probably going to have you back, Jason, because we didn't really get to a lot of the questions, but I think we learned a lot.
sorry.
No, that's great. I actually prefer when this happens. I like when we actually go
Okay.
down a bit of a thought rabbit hole and just sort of just go down that way. And it's actually
Thank
kind of
you.
brought me to something that's always been an interesting part of my life. It was a couple of weekends in a row where this was my only brush with any sort of professional sport. But I'd played basketball for 10 years, and my local VBL team was having some open tryouts. I'm like, what, this is
Brilliant.
the time for me to go see how I go. And the first time I went there, I was kind of a little spooked. So I was shooting everything really long and stuff. It was just terrible. So I spent they were doing
Yep.
2 weekends in a row. So I was like, spent that whole week. I knew what I was bad at in comparison to everybody else. I'm like, all right, I'm seeing where my weaknesses are. I come in that next tryout, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to beat everybody at everything. And so warm up starts. We're doing lunges. I'm winning at the lunges. We get to the end of the lunges. We're like, all right, we're just going
Nice.
to do a 50% jog, and I've just blown
Yeah.
out both my quads. I actually can't run. I can literally
Oh,
only
no.
walk. And so for the rest of the training session, I literally couldn't run. I was trying everything to sprint, but my muscles had none of the energy. I'm sure you've experienced much worse than this. But it made me
100%.
realize, even with that, I had one skill that was good, which was just setting good screens on people. But the best thing about that was, after that, I actually felt much more relaxed about basketball. Before that, I used to think, I can't shoot 3-pointers because I'm not like Steph Curry, even though he shoots thousands a day and I've never shot them. You know, but after that, I just went, you know what? I actually just want to build myself up, kind of like what you're talking about there, where it went away from that comparison and more into the internal, like, how, and
Away.
it's made, I'm probably worse than I've been at basketball, certainly on defense, but I love doing it a lot more because I'm doing it a bit more just at my own pace and just building up my own
Yeah.
skills at my own rhythm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I just wanted
Absolutely.
to,
Well done, you. How'd you go?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's great now. Now it's actually, it's truly like, that's the way that I get into flow. I'm sure, you know, you've got your own ways of doing it, but
Yeah.
that for me now is just, I know what I want to work on,
Yep.
and there's no set goal. Like you're saying, it's a bit more of a purpose of, I just want to just get better. But you've actually in this conversation clarified that for me, why that was such a big day. Cause I used to
Right.
kind of think of it as a negative, like I'd kind of ruined my chance and was not very good, but
Yeah.
it also was a moment that sparked me on a better journey
Yeah,
for basketball.
absolutely. Well, you learn. The point
Mm.
is, you're going to fail, you're going to struggle, learn, grow, work out next time what you can do differently, or what you did, the mistakes you made, or life is about rising. You know what? The most important thing is actually not achieving a big goal. The most important thing is you get up every day and give it your bloody best shot. Oh, sorry, can I say bloody? It's you just give it your best shot, because regret and regret snowballs throughout life. I've seen it because I've worked in financial advice and people retire, and regret snowballs and regret will chew you up. So it isn't about necessarily about what you achieve, although that may bring much extra meaning and pride. It's actually giving something the best shot. And it is not comparing, because, if you're a 45-year-old person that's never done fitness and run, you say you want to run, the simplest analogy, what's the point in comparing yourself to people who are winning races or the best in the world or whatever? What is the point? You're not going to be them. So what's the choice is, I compare myself, I feel really poor, I stop. Or you go, you know what? I won't use the word, but stuff comparison. All this is about is me getting better. All this is about is me proving to myself that I can do something, doing it gradually and being better, being healthier. It's what that brings. It's not the run. It's what the run brings. And that's the advice I, give people, because I get lots of messages of people all over the world. Just compare. If you're going to compare, just compare with yourself. Don't compare also with your 25-year-old self. Compare with who you are today, who you were recently, who you were yesterday, because all that matters is you keep rising. All that matters is and there will be days where you won't improve. You can't improve every day. Accept that, be patient, believe, align to your purpose, and just get back up and do it again.
Well,
That's my
Jason, look,
advice.
I think that's great advice and kind of sort of a great place to sort of round out this conversation. I've taken probably 2 pages of notes here that you can kind of see, just taking
I
down
love
different
that.
bits and pieces.
Well done.
And just, yeah, so many interesting bits and pieces that you've shared, and just really
Thank
the
you.
mindset around failure and pushing yourself, and that creates the belief, to me is just something that I can always kind of think of. But I was going to say, did you have any final thoughts to leave people on, or any last things you wanted to share?
Sorry, one bit there and again, there's always, I'm trying to cover, I probably could have written 160,000, not 85,000 words. I think the point that I didn't quite make was, you can actually get to the point with struggle that you recognize that you welcome struggle. So what I would do, especially when I was doing those really, if I went for 100K training run throughout the night, which I would do every little while if I was training for a night race, I'd run 150Ks during the week, and one night every fortnight, I'd I'd work, I'd come home, I'd set off at 8 p.m. I'd run 100 kilometers throughout the night. I'd sit down and rest for an hour and then I'd just go to work. Is that in the moment, you can actually welcome struggle. You can recognize that struggle is going to be the very thing you're doing is the thing that is going to make you great.
Yeah, no, I love that. And look, you are the proof of this. I think even if I take it right back to one of the first things that you started with, actually in today's conversation, talking about that sort of journey from potentially being a soccer player or football, as it would have been
Yeah.
called in England, and then sort of, going away from that and then still coming back to something within athletics and mastering it is, how many people can do that? And I think that your mentality gives you the framework to do that. So just hearing from you and being able to, again, plan belief is really incredible there.
Thank you. And and,
Yeah.
and life, by the way, life will, the more unlimited your mindset becomes, the more things reveal themselves that you never thought. Did I think 5 years ago I would have written 2 books and I'd be here today? No. And can I just say, sorry, this is my last closing point. I'm going to finish now. The last chapter and the last step, which has been one of the greatest learnings for me, is vulnerability, because I've had to do a lot of tough stuff in my life, overcome a lot of stuff. You become incredibly resilient, like super incredibly resilient. And so, but the thing that I've learned in the last 3 years is to be really vulnerable. And you know what? That is a whole nother stage of growth, because you get when you recognize when you're wrong, you apologize quicker, you have much deeper empathy, you connect with people because, and you don't do things for ego, you do things because they're right. But vulnerability that's been my most recent growth. There you go.
And how about that? I mean, Jason, that's actually a perfect way to lead us into the title of your book, Greatness Doesn't Care, because you're talking about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Greatness Doesn't Care is almost feels sort of away from that, but yet for today's conversation, we can see how they're very connected. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you and grab the book?
The book, I am very pleased to say, 4 weeks out, will be in most stores in Australia. Or if you're flying, you can get it at an airport. If you want to come along, the book launch event is at the Dimmock's CBD store in George Street, so the big iconic Dimmock store. So pretty much any bookshop in Australia and New Zealand, or it'll be on Amazon, Simon and Schuster. I think it's on about 100 platforms already, so about 4 weeks to go. And if you want to reach out to me, Facebook, LinkedIn, my website, I will talk to anyone anytime, and I will help anyone regardless. I love helping people.
Excellent. Well, what a great message to leave us with there, Jason. What a great chat today. And people
Thanks,
go check
Jess.
out
Been
those links.
awesome.
Oh, that's all right. I've loved it. Check out all the links in the description here. People can go
Yep.
click on those and get yourself reading this book, because, I mean, we've barely covered the 14 stages here, so people can really sink their teeth into the rest of that one. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, everybody that's
my
been
pleasure.
listening. Oh, it's awesome to have you. Thank you, everyone that's been sharing and listening. We're really happy. If you wanted to watch this, you can go check it out on YouTube and Spotify. We have over 20,000 subscribers, and we're now at over 300 episodes, so you can go check out the backlog there.
Wow.
But otherwise, everybody, have a magical week.